Hey guys, it's Juanita Coley. I am here with another amazing episode 3 of the Future of Work series that we're doing in season 3 of Call Center Chronicles. Listen, if you did not catch episode 1 with 5-9 and episode 2 with Televerde Foundation, you got to go back. You got to go back to understand where we're going. Okay. I promise you, I'm taking you somewhere. I'm taking y'all somewhere. Okay. But I'm super excited to have this episode 3 with Diversity Window. Our guest for this show is phenomenal. Her name is Jiquanda Nelson, and she is the CEO. Help me welcome her to the show.
Hi.
Jiquanda, how are
I'm so
you?
excited to be here. I'm doing well. Thank you. Just working.
Tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more about Diversity Window. Tell me about your journey also to being the CEO at Diversity Window. And we got to get into it. I have an amazing show, and so I'm super excited to dive into these questions. But tell us more about who you are. Tell us more about Diversity Window and everything of that nature.
Yes, I'm happy to. Well, first of all, thank you for this topic because I think it's wonderful. I think this is a conversation that's very necessary. It was necessary before the pandemic, but I think it's even more necessary now, right? As we think about kind of what the future of work is going to look like. So I just feel really honored that you included me in this conversation. So thank you. So a little bit about me. I oftentimes tell people that I have been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work before it was even called that, right? And before people start saying we want to do more around diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of it stemmed from my, childhood experience of wanting to belong. So that's a different topic in a
Wow.
conversation. Just the way the education system works and how it's different for different students, especially students in gifted programs like me, where there oftentimes are not many, students of color. And so I always had this sense of belonging. So I've always approached the work from a space of, yes, we want diversity in the space. How do we make sure people feel like they belong, they matter, they have a voice, they can contribute, they have access to do that, etc. I didn't have the language for that, of course, at the time, but it's always been a part of who I am. So I've had this wonderful journey of being able to do it in community, through community activism, community organizing, as well in corporate spaces, right? Again, thinking about how we create access to jobs, create spaces of belonging through employee resource networks, etc. So I've had this amazing journey, and it has led to me now being able to head up a diversity, equity, and inclusion technology organization. Yes, one of the things, and many DEI practitioners, if you're here, if you're watching, or you're coming back for this, hopefully you give me a couple snaps, or you're kind of clapping and chatting. The most difficult part of a DEI practitioner or DEI leader's job is having access to data, right? And being able to have that data not only positions you to be able to set meaningful goals, to know where you are, assess where you are, and be able to know where you're going, but also be able to have that conversation with business leaders to help them see, here's where we are, here's where we need to go, and here's how we're going to hold ourselves accountable, right? And celebrate wins along the way. And so that's what Diversity Window is about. It's about helping organizations using our platform to have access to that data, to know how to look at that data, and to know how to set meaningful goals so that you can, again, measure progress, hold, others accountable, hold ourselves accountable. We also have other features around learning. We know that, having diversity is not enough, right? You need to make sure, again, that people feel like they belong. People need
Yes.
to know what behaviors look like to make sure that happens. People need to understand differences in pieces of DEI work, like what's the difference between equality and equity.
Mm,
So we have that piece. And then we
mm.
also have a survey capability, which I'm really excited about because it allows people to measure inclusion and belonging within organizations. So we have ESAT capabilities. A lot of organizations are doing employee satisfaction, right? But what they're not measuring is how do people feel like they belong and are able to contribute in the organization? Do they feel psychologically safe, meaning they can come and show up as they are without feeling like there are going to be any repercussions? Women like me, right, who have different hairstyles and express themselves differently in the way that they dress, want to be able to walk into a building or show up on a Zoom, right, as they are, knowing that people are going to listen to them, etc. So I really love it. It's my favorite part of the work because I know the challenges of not having data. So that's what we're here to do. We also provide services, of course, to help coach people, guide them, help them understand how to connect initiatives and programs that connect to that journey of where they want to go, right? A lot of people will say, well, we need, more diverse folks. Well, let's look at your policies.
Yeah.
Let's look at your recruiting team. How are they reaching out to people? What are the connections you need to make? What learning do they need? So that's diversity window.
That's amazing. I love that Diversity Window is a tech company that connects the data to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like it's really driving. It's one thing to talk about an initiative, it's another to have the data to support it, right? To be able to really put in actionable steps to support the initiatives that you're trying to drive within your organization. So that's what really got my attention about Diversity Window. It was like, okay, show me the data, show me the numbers. And I love
Yes.
that it's a tech platform that helps companies to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So tell me about when I say, Jiquanda, when I say to you the future of work, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. I think it is about taking a look at where we have been, our ways of working and ways that we've done things, and understanding that they haven't worked, right? Especially when we look at, a lot of organizations. So I'll speak to this specifically from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. A lot of organizations made commitments, specifically right in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. Everyone felt this gut, kind of check, right, around, oh my gosh, we need to do something. We need to show up. We need to learn. We need to
Mm,
grow. All of these things where things like this have been happening, right,
mm.
for many years, right? So
Yeah,
I
it's
always
not
kind of
new.
use that as a moment that has been a pivoting moment for us. And on top of a global pandemic where we realize there are people who don't have access to basic needs, right? They don't have access to opportunities. They don't have access to things that should be available to them. And it's not because of them, it's because we have in our systems and our structures that have created barriers for people, right? So I think that was like an awakening for many people. People
Mm.
like me will tell you it's always been here. We just haven't put a priority on it, right?
Yep, yep, yep.
But really taking that look at what can we do as organizations, as community leaders, as business leaders, to really think about how do we look internally at how we can break down some of those barriers to create access for people. So when I think of future of work, it's so many different components of it, right? So it's the future of work in who have we been hiring and bringing into our organizations, right? I think the first step when folks start looking at DEI, they're like, well, we need to diversify our employees, right? Or you may have a diverse employee population, but you don't have a diverse leadership team, right?
Mm,
So
mm.
part of that is about we don't have decision makers in our decision making rooms that reflect the very same people that we want to serve, that we, kind of say we're proud about doing good, right? When it comes to our communities and
Right.
people that we're serving in our business, but we don't have those decision makers in the room, right? You also look at the fact of like just even access, right? And I love using this as an example, especially when around equity, right? We think about, folks who may be in urban spaces or not urban spaces, but more rural spaces, right? Where internet, right, or Wi-Fi is not that
Mm.
great. We think about people who may be in spaces where they don't have it. Like, how do we as organizations even support them, right? Like, yes, when a lot of organizations move their employees home, yes, it's great. Give everyone a laptop, give everyone a desktop or whatever folks are doing to work at home. But what about those people that can't access Wi-Fi, right? Because we saw that even with students, right? So
Right.
thinking about how are we more intentional on providing resources for people so that they can show up at their best, so they can do that work, even if it means we have to work harder. Equity work is about meeting people where they are. And I think organizations are
Mm.
starting to see more of that, right? For an example, in the recruiting space, right? Most recruiters might go on LinkedIn or, they might go to some of their partnerships that they have to find talent. And when you think about talent and when you hear about some of the barriers, it's always, well, we don't know where to find diverse folks, right? Well, you can't go just on LinkedIn because everyone doesn't have access to LinkedIn, right? And so thinking about those ways of working that requires us to go beyond what we've traditionally done to really connect and reach with people in a way in terms of where they are and what they have access to. From a social perspective, employees have, they are almost requiring, right? They are wanting as part of their expectations to go to a business or a company that their organization stands for something, right? So they can know. They want to know, I want to work for an organization that is connected to what's happening in the world, whatever that topic is for you, whether it's sustainability around the environment, whether it's social justice issues, whether it's knowing that we, are donating dollars to organizations, or I have the opportunity to volunteer in my community. Employees want to know that, right? So no longer is it just, hey, we're a good company, we offer good benefits, we offer good pay. It's also around, am I going to work in an organization that is making a meaningful impact and difference in the world, in the way they do business, and the way they show up? So that's kind of how we look at it in the space, right? Really connecting it to, how do we make sure that organizations are doing their best to show up at their best to bring in the best talent?
Yeah, that's good because, you know, we even had some challenges like that, right? As we, when I think about the example that you used about the pandemic sent a lot of people home to work from home, and, about equity meeting people where they are. Some people, yeah, we send them home with laptops, but if they didn't have access to Wi-Fi, then they're not able to show up as their best self. And they could be an amazing employee, right?
Yeah.
They could have amazing work ethic, but
Yeah.
they don't have access to Wi-Fi,
Right. Which
right?
is a structural issue.
Right. So thinking about those things which is what was going to lead me to my next question, right, was how does DE and I play an impact in the future of work, right? So we know what the future of work is, right? Or we have a construct around what we think it may be, right? But how does DE and I play a effort in when we think about our efforts as it relates to the future of work?
Yeah, I think so. Before, when you think about, even just from, I always approach work from a structural, systemic thing, right? When you think from even a culture within an organization, right? Most of the time, an organization has a certain culture, it has a certain way of working, that extends beyond the beautiful statements, right, or the beautiful posters that you might see in the building, right, or in the email signatures,
Right.
right. There is a culture that exists within the organization, and I oftentimes say that your culture shows up in the way your people show up and the
Yes.
ways of working more than it does the beautiful statement you have on your
Yes.
website and the beautiful posters that you have, right? And so when we think about, kind of the future of work, and we've seen this kind of trend, like you'll see a lot of culture leaders now, right? Folks who are, even within maybe HR, maybe they have a function or focus within HR, focusing specifically on culture, because that is absolutely critical. So when we think about how that impacts DE and I think that's where that belonging comes in, right? You know, a lot of our policies don't support people from different lived experience. For example, when we think about people with disabilities, right? Like
Yes.
a lot of our organizations haven't had to think about, like, are you using, audio visual accessibility tools on your website, right?
Yes.
When we think about even people from the LGBTQIA plus community, right? Our policy supporting parental leave or leave, right? For couples who are beyond what we have seen as like a traditional, mom maternity leave, right? And then some organizations have paternity, but what does that look like for people who are adopting or people who are even caregivers, right? And so thinking about, how do we support folks, again, these are going to be your best employees, but they need that extra support. And
Support
I don't even want to say support, they need that extra space to be able to show up
as them
however
full
they need
selves.
to be as them full selves, that allows them to be their full selves, that allows them to be able to know that I can be a caregiver of my parents at the same time while still doing great work, because my organization has policies. My organization has, even something like shared work, right? Shared roles, right? Where someone may need a period of time where it's like, I cannot give 100%, right? In this particular role. But if I could share this job with someone so that I can still be stay on, still have benefits, still contribute, and then still be able to do my work, right?
That's
And
an
so,
interesting concept.
yeah, it's
We're gonna have to
huge.
we're gonna have to come back to that.
Yes.
I'm coming back to that question.
But it all comes down to like it all comes down to creating a space where people can show up at their best, right?
Yeah.
As they are. Because oftentimes you'll find people, they're stressed, they're afraid, they don't want to share kind of their personal experiences that are happening in their life, even if it's weighing down on them, because they oftentimes may fear, like, not getting opportunities or not being able to keep their job because policies don't reflect that to support. So that is belonging. That's
Yeah.
creating a space where people know that no matter what, I can show up and I have a job here. I have a team backing me up here. I can be here.
Now I'm gonna play devil's advocate just because it's my show, right?
You can do what you want to do because that's your business.
Because that's my business, as Tabitha
That's your
Brown
business,
say.
as
Right?
Tabitha Brown says.
Being an employee, right? So I started as an agent on the phones, and I've been an employee.
Yes.
To now running a company that has to think about, okay, let's be profitable so that, for the greater good, everybody can be employed. How do you think companies, CEOs like yourselves, or, straddle that fence of, like you said, having shared roles, staying profitable? Do I overstaff to compensate for the sense of belonging, right? To make sure that, okay, well, I know you can only do 10% of your job right now, but I want to make you feel comfortable and I want to make you feel like you belong. So I'm going to pay 100% of your salary, but you only going to do 10% of your job for this season. Like, what do I'm thinking as a CEO, but I've also been an employee. So I understand both roles and both dynamics of that. What's your answer to that?
Yeah, I think that I always say, if you create it, the people will come. Like, period. So say, for instance, a shared job, right? Think about two people doing one job, right? So of course they wouldn't make 100% of their salary that they would make for doing it full time. But if someone needs to take a step away for this period of time, again, we've had caregivers of like elderly parents who are going through some sort of treatment, or, spouses who are going, right, who can show up, but because think about it, they're going to try to show up. They may not be able to give their best. What do you do in that case, right? Like,
Yeah.
typically, most people aren't going to, like, let them go as quickly, right? Whereas, like, you're going to spend time, low productivity, right? Someone who could be impacting the culture because they're not showing up at their best.
Yeah.
And it's an issue over time, where if
Yeah.
you're being proactive, well, you know what, this employee needs to do this shared role, and this person actually wants to spend time with their newborn
Right.
at home. So they would love to be able to do this shared role together.
Yeah.
So you have this one role taken care of that you don't have to go recruit for and cost money. You're not going to have a vacant role that'll sit open, and somebody else is going to have to take the work anyway. So then their productivity is going to go down. It's really a proactive way. Now, I'm sure, and I'm not a HR law expert, so I'm sure there are some pieces that come around that, like, what benefits look like and what the pay is. But think about like, if you approach it from, how do we provide flexibility for people who can't work a 40-hour work week, right? There's going to be people who would love to do that, right?
Yeah.
If you create it, the people will come. So
Yeah.
that way you can focus your effort on, other roles, right? You have this one role taken care of. You didn't have to recruit for it. You didn't have to have a vacant role. You didn't have to distribute the work among people with already overflowing workloads. It's being proactive.
I want to know from our audience, like, what companies are doing that? Is that the future of work? Right. So when I was talking to 5'9", and a couple weeks back, we talked about the gig economy, and that's kind of what the shared role role kind of reminds me of, it's kind of like the gig economy, except for they're not contractors. They actually are employees. They just have a fraction of the work now. And that pay may follow that. So you have a fraction of the work and you have a fraction of the benefits and you have a fraction of the pay, right? But you still know that when you're ready to ramp back up and give it your all, then you do still have a spot and you still are here, part of the company and the culture. So I wonder from those in the audience, like, okay, Jiquanda, I can rock with you on that answer. I can rock with you on that answer. So one of the things that I think, my next question, so I would love to hear from the audience about shared roles, right? Like, is that a thing for the future of work? How do we make that work? Do we think that would increase employee experience and employee engagement? That's what I want to know. Okay. That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
The next question I have for you, Jiquanda, was around when we talk about DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, and all, when we talk about this, I think one of the things that, and this is just me being an African-American female, right? I think we do that conversation a disservice when we talk about it only from a race perspective.
Absolutely.
Right? Because we're diverse in so many different ways. I mean, by definition, diversity means different, right? So if we have a different background, a different education, a different vantage point or viewpoint, we're different, right? Yeah. How do you think companies help to push that narrative beyond just, okay, race and how we are different? How do we start to look at other ways in which we're different and create programs around those differences?
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And again, the way I have always approached the work is there are absolutely important conversations that need to happen around, racism, sexism,
absolutely, 100%,
all those things, right? Like absolutely important conversations.
1000%.
But like you said, historically diversity, and actually not even the equity piece, right? That is a more recent approach and like term that people are starting to use in the word. But historically it has been about, hey, we need more people of color, we need more women, but that's not always the case. So I use this as an example because it was such a learning moment for me, right? I was asked to join a board. This was local in my hometown. I was asked to join a board. It was part of their effort to diversify the board. So what better way to diversify your board than to ask a young, Black woman named Jiquanda, right, to join your board?
They were diverse.
Yes, it was very diverse, right? And so, I went in very excited to be able to, have a voice, have a perspective that was new. And honestly, Juanita, a lot of the challenges and barriers to me participating, feeling like I belonged, feeling like I was adding value was because I was the youngest person in the room. A lot of those people's, I kind of laugh about this with some of the leaders who was there with me along the way. I got the terms of like, I have socks older than you, right? Like, and I'm like, so does that mean my point was invalid? When you were a baby, I was doing these things. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm here now. And I have experience and I have a voice, right? And it was very challenging for me because I would oftentimes walk away from our board meetings or different, kind of engagements wondering like, do I really know what I'm talking about? Is this the right space for me? Like, do I belong here?
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I was Black. It was because I was the youngest person in the room. And so I use that example for people because oftentimes it's really about folks having these experiences who feel like they're the only, the other, or the different, right? Yeah. So I'll use my team, for example. I worked at a global organization and I had teams in 5 different countries on 4 different continents. And, there was time to hire a role and I ended up hiring a white male in his 50s who brought diversity to my team. You oftentimes wouldn't think of a white male being a diverse hire because most of the time people think it's women or people of color. But because I had people from, different generations and different parts of the world, different country, he actually was a diverse hire, right?
Yeah.
And so when we think about the conversation of diversity, I oftentimes say, I can't wait for the day we don't even say diversity, right?
Yes.
Because it's really about differences, which is great. You want that for your organization, right? It's really around who is missing from this conversation, from these decision making tables or spaces, from this team, from this experience that can help us add greater value to where we're trying to go, what we're trying to do, and who we're trying to serve.
Mm.
That's what your diversity is. So sometimes they may look like, you know what, our team is pretty experienced. We could use new perspective, new thoughts, new generational, leaders kind of coming into the fold. We could use, all of us in this team. We've been at this organization for 10 years. All we know is this organization for the past decade. We could use an external hire, right, to bring a different perspective to help us change the way we look at things, etc. So I always tell people start with who's missing, right?
Yes.
I use this example even in healthcare. I'm in a room with leaders, all committed to do DEI work. We were talking about language access, and I remember saying one time, like, who in here speaks another language? No one. I'm like, I can speak Spanish, vacation Spanish, right?
I gotta use that. I gotta use that. I'm telling you, it's stolen.
Spanish.
This is good as stolen. Vacation Spanish.
I can speak vacation Spanish to engage and connect and everything else. But like, how are we trying to decide language access when we have none of us speak another language, right?
Wow, that's
And
good.
so how about we reach out to folks who speak multi languages, who are multilingual, who can help contribute to this conversation as we make decisions. So that's really kind of when we look at it, it's about who's missing, what perspectives, whether it's lived experience. I use this example too, you know, Black woman named Jiquanda. I grew up in a very small town, like super small. Like we had one high school where 3 cities went to the high school, small,
Wow.
2 grocery stores. I could meet a Jaquanda exactly like me, same age, same birthday, everything, who grew up in New York. And you better believe you put us in a room, we're bringing diversity into that room because that Jaquanda is going to navigate the world a lot different than the small town girl. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because of our experiences and where we even kind of grew up and lived. And so that's really the conversation we need to be having. And then when you move to that belonging piece, right? Well, equity, let's not overstep equity. Equity is around, are we creating barriers for these people, right? Like, can I show up in a room and be heard even though people are still like, they've never experienced a Jaquanda like me before,
Right.
right? Can I also be seen as an emerging leader despite the fact that I have, colored hair or I like a lot of bling, right? Can I still be seen as someone who is a leader? Because even a model of what we see as leader, right? Like some people might see it to be like her background is like a lot, right? But I love it because it's going to help me show up at my best. I love color, right? Like, but if you look in certain situations, I have been told like you're not going to be taken seriously if you wear your hair that way, right? Like, so those conversations are also a part of it. Like, how are we creating barriers for people with these other experiences? And then again, that belonging, right? Like, can people show up as they are without fear of consequences or retribution? So
I was gonna ask that question too. What you just said, you said that you have been told before, like, hey, you won't be taken seriously if you wear your hair this way or if you do this. I was gonna say, have you ever? So we know the term victim shaming or victim blaming, right? Sometimes I know that I have felt in the mission to push forward in diversity, equity, and inclusion, or build culture, victim shaming, like, oh, well, you're only talking about this because you're Black, or you're only talking about this because you're female, or you're only concerned. And it's like, no, that's who I am. But I almost feel like if we talk about it, then sometimes it's victim shaming. It's like,
yeah,
oh, well,
yeah.
you shouldn't be talking about this because you're making the others feel bad because you are who you are, And so, I was going to ask, have you ever felt that? Have you ever felt like, you couldn't even talk about diversity, equity, inclusion because if you talk about it, you're talking about it only because you are African American or because you're a woman, and not thinking about, which is why I have such a strong stance on, it's so much bigger than just race, right?
Yeah.
We're different in so many other ways. And I think once we can move past that, then we can really start to have diverse, conversation. equitable conversation, inclusion, and belonging conversations. I have a question though for you, Jiquanda. Do you think, I have my own personal opinion, but do you have a preferred component, or do you think one of the components are more important than the others, or have more, not more important, but have a bigger impact out of the D, the E, and the I? Do you?
Oh, yeah. Um, yes, I do. So I'm going to answer both of the questions that you put forth. I'll answer this one first, and then I'll go back to my experience in advocating for DEI work as a Black woman, right? So I do think that they hold more weight. Like, I mean, I kind of said it earlier. Like, I wish we stopped even saying diversity. Like, we're all diverse, period. Right? Like, we are two
Right.
Black women, but we are diverse in our experiences, in our
Absolutely.
knowledge, all of those things, right? So diversity to me, let's just stop saying it. But we'll get there. It's very aspirational. I think equity is the most important,
Mm,
honestly, because if we're not doing true equity work, so I'll use this actually from a perspective of community organizing. So I've done community organizing for many years. And the thing about community organizing is it addresses systems that create the problems that we see,
mm,
right? So in community organizing, so when you think about it from, and this is how it was taught for me, from like a charity versus justice. So charity says, we have hungry people, we're going to feed them, right? Because we want to help them. Where justice questions the system, and why do we have hungry people in the richest country in the world,
right.
right?
Right.
Like why, like, yes, we should tutor students, but why do certain schools have access to good quality education when others do not? That is a very systemic issue, like how we fund schools through local taxes, right? I can get off in a whole separate situation about that. But it really comes down to our systems creating barriers. And if you're not actively, assessing, reviewing,
Mm,
changing, dismantling
yeah.
systems that create barriers to having diversity, to creating inclusion, it won't work. I'll use one specific to the workplace, and many people don't know this. There are many countries, we're seeing states that they're doing better now, but there was a ban, like it was very legal and lawful
Mm.
to remove someone or eliminate someone from the interview process if they had locks,
Yes. So
dreadlocks.
I did a show on that. I did a show on that.
Yes. That
Yes.
is very systemic. That is not equitable,
Yes.
right? Like, that is, so to me, it's around the barriers, right? Even thinking of something of like job descriptions, right? If you continue to put in your job descriptions that you want someone with 20 years of experience, you're automatically, kind of, now some roles, do not get me wrong, some roles you may need it, right? Or you need certain credentialing, right? But there are some organizations now, and I've been an executive administrative assistant before, and that role is absolutely critical. It's very important. Some roles require a degree, a college degree, for someone to be an executive administrative assistant or an administrative assistant. That is a barrier because there are people who are wonderful workers, and even not even just an administrative assistant role, many roles within our organizations. There are people who've worked in our organization who understand the culture, they understand ways of working. They may not have a degree, but they could totally do that role if given the opportunity. But
Mm.
that degree is a barrier because everybody cannot afford to go to college.
Yes.
Not everyone wants to go to college, and not everyone has the opportunity. Some people have to go right into working, right? Like, they can't afford to go to college, or they don't have the time, they don't have the capacity, but that has nothing to do with the skill that they can bring to a job. That is equity issues. That is a barrier, right? And so if you're not actively working on equity, you cannot do DE&I work and do it well.
Mm. Well, y'all heard it here first. Okay. The E. Okay. We need the D and the E. Okay.
Yes,
And if you're
absolutely.
talking to me, I'm gonna say I. Okay. We need the
Yes.
I.
And then,
You know,
yes.
because I firmly believe that. we can be diverse, we can be as different and have all of that, and we can even have a seat at the table, right? We can even
Yes,
have equity and
absolutely.
remove these systemic
Yes.
barriers. However, if you keep looking at those people that are diverse as leopards, right, and they don't feel like they belong, they're not going to, they're still not going to show up as their full self. So, which is why I think we see the great resignation, right? I
Yes.
think the reason we see the great resignation is because, they are saying, hey, I can show up as my full self over here. And rather than show up differently at work, right? Even though you've created the position and I can voice my opinion, I know you don't truly value me,
Right.
so I'll go and show up over here,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And
So
I
I
think,
think you need the eye. That's
yeah.
my thing.
Yeah, no, I think you need them all, right. And I think, and it's funny because I remember I follow a lot of DEI leaders because it's just such a growing space.
Yeah.
And a leader put equity begets inclusion.
Mm,
Inclusion begets equity or
mm,
diversity, right? If you're equitable and people don't have a problem accessing just even being hired in your organization, right? You're going to bring that inclusion, right? Because people can feel like they're inclusion. And if you create a space of inclusion, you're going to bring that diversity within your organization. But I love this quote by Verna Myers, who's like a DEI, like just trailblazer. I'm a huge fan of theirs. And the quote says, diversity is about inviting people to the party, which many of us have heard that, right?
yes.
Inclusion is asking them to dance. And I say, with my spin on it, equity is creating a diverse planning committee, right?
Yes.
Because you can invite me to your party, or I can throw a party and invite people, but what if they don't like my music,
Right.
right?
Or
Everybody
they're
may
vegan and they don't have no
Oh,
veggie options.
exactly. There's no meat options because guess what? We some meat eaters in here, so we don't have bacon wrapped, right? But if you had no voice at the table to do that, you can create this beautiful party, but and people might show up, but are they really going to enjoy it at their best
Yeah.
if they don't find the music that they really like, or they can't even eat, right? And now they got to go through a drive-through somewhere
Right.
because you didn't have the food that they
To
eat,
serve.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's that.
That's good. So, okay, I got a couple more questions, and I know we're
Yeah.
coming down to the bottom of our time, but we're gonna do a rapid fire session. Okay, so
Ooh, okay.
rapid fire. I think I'm thinking about calling this shots fired. Okay,
Ooh,
so
shots
shots
fired.
fired. I'm going to say two words. You're gonna tell me what immediately comes to mind when I say
Okay.
those words. Okay.
Do I
All
have to
right.
also say two words or just say a statement?
No, just say a statement
Okay.
or what comes to mind as soon as I
Okay.
say these two words. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Y'all ready? All right. So y'all in the comments, tell me too. Y'all go off, go off. Okay. All right. So shots fired. Here we go. Equality versus equity.
Uh, Systemic barriers and meeting people where they are.
Okay. All right. All right. I like it. DE&I versus affirmative action.
Ooh, affirmative action is because I was told I had to. DEI is I'm willing to do this.
Okay. All right. All right. Great resignation versus employee experience.
Ooh, okay. Do I have to choose, or can I just
No, you're
comment
just telling
on
me
the one?
what you think when I
Okay,
say these
okay.
things.
I would say employee experience impacts great resignation.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Can I, girl? You know I like to talk.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I know. So these are industry buzzwords that we hear all the
Yes,
time. So what made me think of this
yes,
segment
yes.
is, we throw these words around all the time,
All
and
these words
sometimes
out
they're
there.
completely opposites of each other, or they
Yes,
impact each other. And so I
yes,
said, man, I wonder if I put these words together, what would people think? So yeah, go
yeah.
ahead and
Okay,
that's
great.
the section. That's the
I don't
segment.
want to
So go
mess up
ahead.
the vibe. Okay, because I can go back to even the equality versus equity, but yeah, I think employee experience is exactly that. No longer are the days that people just want to go to work and just do their job and leave. I mean, work impacts a lot of our life,
Yeah.
right? And there's another amazing culture leader. Hey, Angela Howard, that I admire and I follow her podcast. I think it's Humanly Possible. She said, "Are we sending, as organizations, are we sending our employees home better than when they came to work? Right? What type of employee are we sending home to their spaces, to their families, to their communities? Right?" And then I even think for International Women's Day, I think it's when I posted it, as I was reflecting on the day. It's a day of celebration and women and all of that. But I felt so heavy on that day. I'm like, and reading all the experiences of women, I'm like, we just have so much, we have a further way to go when you hear the experiences of women in the workplace. And I'm like, these are the things I want to say to other people who don't identify as women. Like, listen to women when they speak, believe them when they tell their stories, right? And don't be the person that you wouldn't want to hear about negatively or painfully or traumatically from your wife, from your daughter, from your sister. Don't be that person, right?
Yeah.
And so people's experiences will impact if they're going to stay. And I think people are, gone are the days are most people kind of sticking around just to stay. They're like, I'm out. There are other options out here for me.
Right. Man, Jiquanda, this has been an amazing show. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up. Because we over. Tell me what's next for Diversity Window. Where can people find you, connect? How can they support Diversity Window? I'm just so looking forward to everything that's coming next. So tell us.
Yeah, I say what's next for us is, we are coming. I say, we say startup, but I feel like we're beyond that because we have some really dope clients. We're doing amazing work already. Of course, we're growing. The team is growing. We just launched new kind of user experience pieces of our platform. So I say to those who, whether you have a diversity team or not, most people don't have a diversity team. They just all one person trying to do all the work for the whole entire organization in the world. Reach out to us to hear how we can support you, whether it's through our platform and helping you have that meaningful data to set meaningful DEI goals that you can meaningfully track, right? Reach out to us if you're looking to start measuring inclusion and belonging in a very easy, user-friendly way. Reach out to us. If you want to have learning and training, reach out to us. If you want to know, hey, we don't even know where we are on this journey. We don't even know where we need to go. Reach out to us. We want to support you every step of the way. So www.diversitywindow.com. You can find us there. We're also on LinkedIn. I am also on LinkedIn, so people can find me there. I'm also on Instagram as just Jiquanda, where you will see a little bit of work, a little bit of personal experience, I am very proud about my kids who are very much into my work and in my space. I'm going to brag a little bit about my daughter, who I just love her so much. She's 7 and a half. I better get that half in there or she would be upset. She did a word problem for math. They had to write their own word problem and she used my name. I was like, I've never seen my name used in a word problem. It's always Susie and Johnny. And so I had a word problem with my name. So bringing true inclusion. Right?
Yes.
True inclusion, even in her little 7-year-old space. So
yeah, you ain't never, and I said you ain't never seen a Jiquanda in a word problem, math word problem.
I was like, history was made.
We changing the world. One math problem at a time.
So that's us. We're getting the word out, and people want to, hear me speak or hear the team speak, go to conferences. We're there. We're everywhere.
Awesome. Well, hang out with me in the green room. I'm going to wrap the show, and I'll be over right with you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, y'all. I told y'all it was going to be an amazing show. My jaws are literally hurting from smiling so much, laughing so much. I think this was just an amazing, such a timely conversation, because as we continue the topic on the future of work, what that looks like, we can't really talk about that without talking about DE&I. And what better company to have than a tech company that focuses on showing the data, showing the numbers behind how we diversify, how we show up equitable, how we include people. I thought it was amazing. Hopefully you did as well. I would love to hear your feedback, see more of your comments in the chat. Until next time, guys, see y'all soon. Bye.